All right. Hello and welcome to another sales chat. My name is John Golden from Pipeliner CRM and SalesPOP online sales magazine. I am here in beautiful San Diego. It's a beautiful sunny day today. And Martha is in a little bit of a chillier Vienna in Austria. She's got her scarf on. And today we are delighted to be joined by John Doerr, who is president of the Rain Group. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm somewhere in between San Diego and Vienna in terms of weather, but I'll accept it.
Yeah. And where are you today?
I'm in Boston.
Ah, Boston. Very nice. Okay, so as I said, John is the president of the Rain Group. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Rain Group, they are a premier sales consulting, sales performance improvement organization. They do fantastic research, which is why we love speaking to them. And today we're going to talk about how to drive sales motivation and maximize energy, focus, and engagement. And as we are now, for most of us, in Q2 of this year, it's a good time to talk about that. So, John, let's start off. Like, what are some of the ways that you can actually help promote and cultivate a mindset and get people highly motivated to sell your product or service?
Well, that's an excellent, obviously, question because it's something that everybody struggles with. And I want to step back from that question just a little bit because I think what happens normally is sales organizations say, well, let's figure out how to give the skills to help people sell better. And that's a great idea. I'm not saying that's not a place to look, but oftentimes they look at their sales force and they say they know how to do this, they know how to do that, they know how to do the third thing, and yet things aren't happening. And it often comes down to a question of motivation. And how do I get them to want to sell what I've asked them to sell? And I think one of the struggles is they're looking at it, how do I motivate somebody? How do I create that? And a lot of that is asking the salespeople themselves to motivate, find that motivation within themselves. What is it that drives them to wake up every morning? And I think one of the things that we did is we wanted an answer to that question. We wanted to know what drove sales productivity, not just the sales skills. And what we found is that it is a question of being able to flex that motivation muscle. People say, well, I'm not motivated. No, they feel stuck with, I'm not motivated today. But it's a muscle and I got to use it. And I think sometimes what happens is you've been in sales for a while and you lose that motivation. You forget to ask yourself, why am I doing this today? What is the thing that is bringing me to work every day that gets me excited about selling? Now, we can say it's always more exciting to sell for a great brand or sell a great service or great product, but I would say you have to find the things that within yourself. So it really starts with helping people look at what motivates themselves and fuel that energy.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points. And by the way, if you want to join in on the conversation on Twitter, it's #SalesChats, and Martha is monitoring the Twitter chat. So, John, there's an interesting point, right? I mean, everybody has to find their intrinsic motivation. But you have obviously salespeople. Every one of us, all of us, have a choice how we show up every day, right? And as the point you said earlier, if you say, "Oh, I'm not motivated," in many ways that's a choice you're making, is to show up lacking motivation. So I think part of what you're saying is you have to encourage salespeople to find it in themselves what it is that motivates them and make a choice.
So one of the choices is it's deciding, and by the way, this can apply to any work or anything you do in your personal life, but it's about making that decision about what do you want to do. It's deciding, how am I going to find that thing that makes me excited? And one of the first things we say you have to do as a salesperson is decide what we call new reality. What is your new reality? So I show up today and I'm feeling okay, but not 100% motivated. Why not? Well, I have to know what I want to do. What drives me? Now, we all have quotas in sales. We all have commission plans. We all have that compensation. But what we have found is that's not the number one thing that's driving. It's really knowing what you want to make progress towards. There is a book called The Progress Principle by Ammirabili and Kramer. And what it talks about is what motivates people the most. And they asked 600 managers and 600 salespeople what were some of the things. And among those were compensation and recognition and support in making progress towards a goal. And most of the managers said it had to do with recognition, right? People want a pat on the back. But what the salespeople said, what the people doing the work said, it's support in making progress towards a goal. That's what drives them. So if that's the case, if I'm going to be most motivated by making progress towards a goal, I have to have a goal. I have to decide what that is, and it has to be meaningful to me. So we call that our new reality. And let me give you, I just want to give you a fun example. And this I will attribute to Zig Ziglar, the famous sales motivational person from long ago, and reading his stuff and listening to his stuff. And he talks about the golfer Byron Nelson. Now, Byron Nelson, for those of you who aren't into golf or don't read history, was a golfer in the 30s. And he won most everything, but he wanted to win more. He figured I should get better. That was his goal. But that was kind of an amorphous goal. And what the problem was is he didn't like to practice. He didn't like to practice, particularly his approach shots to the green. He knew he had to get better. But what he did care about is he was a Texan and he wanted more cattle and he wanted bigger ranch. And so he decided his goal was not to win more tournaments, but to get more cattle and to get more acreage. So every day you'd see him out on the practice green, and what he's citing with every swing is one more head of cattle, one more acre of land. And that was his motivation. And the following year, after he decided that was his meaningful goal, he did win just about everything there was out there to win. Now let's apply it to salespeople. They get a quota. That's Byron Nelson's winning more tournaments. But what does it mean to them? Do they want the promotion? Do they want to be in President's Club? Do they want to just earn more money for their family, to put their kids through school, to retire early? What is the thing that drives them? So when their new reality, so when they look at it, they say, this is why I want to sell today. And without that, it's very hard to keep moving forward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there is real power in doing some simple things. As you said, I mean, with Byron Nelson was the cattle, with some of the salespeople, you know, watching in today, maybe it's President's Club, maybe you want to buy a new car, maybe maybe you want to secure your kids' college fund or whatever it is.
Right.
But whatever that goal is, put it in front of you. Put it in front of you, like physically put it in front of you, like write it on something in front of you or put a picture in front of you, and make sure that when you hit those motivation dips that we all do, that you can just look again and sort of refocus yourself and go, this is why I'm doing it.
And you bring up the excellent point with the why, because there are days when you go out the door and you don't quite have it all together. And if you can answer the question, why, then that starts to say, oh, I know why I'm doing it. And then each step along the way becomes more meaningful. Now, one of the things we found as well when we studied people who are most productive in sales, we found that not only did they have those goals, but they had a plan to get there. So it's great to have this lofty goal, but what is your plan? So you take it from the what I want and why I want it to how am I going to get there. So they break it down into their quarterly goals and their weekly action plans and their daily action plans. And so each day they know what has to be done, and they know they can just say to themselves, why am I doing this again? Oh yeah, I want to achieve so-and-so. And that's the crucial part. So you have to have the goals, but as you mentioned, you have to have the why, but then you have to say, what am I going to do?
Yeah, and I think that's another great point that you raised there, because as you said, you have to have the goals, but sometimes, yeah, maybe it's January and you have your quota and that looks way far off, right? And that looks very daunting. So you have to, you know, break it down into steps to get there. One interesting guy that I talked to, John, you'll find this interesting. is a guy called Ruben Gonzalez, right? And he's competed in 3 Winter Olympics, and he's trying to be the oldest Winter Olympian of all time. And he competed in the luge, right? You know, which is the crazy one where you lie down on basically a piece of wood with a couple of rails on it and go about 5,000 miles an hour. And he said, from the moment he started doing luge up until about 2 years ago, he was always petrified when he started, because he'd always think of like, how am I going to get to the end without killing myself, right? And he got these new coaches, I think from Germany or something, and they said, you're looking at this all wrong. They said, you don't have to worry about getting to the bottom. You worry about the next corner.
Yeah.
So you only worry about 20, I think it's like 10 or 20 feet in front of you at a time, right? Just worry about how do I do the best to get and maneuver this corner, and then the next one, and then the next one. And I think that translates into it as well as what you're talking about. It, I think, is when you have goals as a salesperson, is look at how do I achieve this step in front of me to the best of my ability, and that will get me to the next step, and so on and so forth.
So one of the hacks that we have to improve your motivation and therefore your productivity is about having a morning ritual that's sacred. And this really goes to what you were just saying about Gonzalez, is that take it a step at a time. And what we say in the morning is you should know what you're supposed to do. So the first thing is recite your goals out loud. And a lot of these things, sometimes when we teach the workshops on this, people you can tell the people say, do I really say this out loud? What will my spouse say when I'm talking to myself in the bathroom? But you say your goal out loud, and then you ask yourself, will I do this? And that's a reality check that says, is there anything getting in the way? Is my attitude right that day? Can I make adjustments? So you're asking yourself, will I do that? And then you're checking your attitude. If it's not right, you're figuring out what you have to do, whether it's self-talk. We talk about self-talk because we give ourselves too many negatives. So how do I turn that around? And you actually keep track of the progress you're making. And the other thing that's important is, how will I reward myself? What is that little reward I'm going to do today? When we started our business, I had to do a lot of cold calling. And fortunately, I don't have to do that anymore. But I followed that routine. This is what I'm going to do today. If I get a meeting by this time or by that time, my reward could be I get to go out and take a longer run. Now, for some people, that sounds like punishment, but for me, it was a reward. Or I might say, if I get this by the afternoon, I'm going to go down the street and I'm going to get myself a hot fudge sundae. And so it's a motivation for the day to take those pieces. So as you said, sometimes you can look at your goal for the year and go, oh, that's so daunting. But if you break it down to a daily routine and stick to that, if you do it every day, you add it all up, you're going to get to where you have to get to.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that, John. I love that concept which you said about number one, about reciting, your goals for the day or whatever. But the will I do this? Because I think that's a critical piece. Because let's face it, we could all get up in the morning and recite our goals.
Yeah.
But actually asking yourself that extra question of, am I actually going to do this? I think that's really, really powerful.
Now, one of the things when we're talking about goals, and there's a lot of things about Robert Cialdini and what he said about goal setting and what's achieved, but think about anything that you do in terms of personal goals. So you set a goal that says, I'm thinking about this now because the Boston Marathon is about 3 days away. I'm not running in it. But if you think, I want to do that, you set that as your goal. But if you don't say it to anybody, if you don't announce it, it's easy to say, oh, I didn't really mean it. You think of New Year's resolutions that never get taken up because you don't say them. So that writing of goals is one step. And writing the goals of the actions actually into your calendar. We talk about calendaring, invest in time, you put it right in there. But if you share it with somebody, now oftentimes in a sales setting, you're sharing it with your manager. But what we found is that by sharing it and having an accountability partner, you're much more likely to achieve it. And there's less of that sense of somebody evaluating you, but more somebody really trying to help. So you think about coaches. And
Yeah.
that's what
So who would you say, who would you advise or recommend as an accountability, partners that appear? What do you normally recommend?
we usually recommend a peer, and a peer that you trust. It's got to just think
Sure.
about that relationship you're developing. You want somebody who's going to give you honest feedback when you're not doing it, but you don't want somebody to be a jerk about it, because that's what you avoid. So you find somebody that you will do, and then you check on a regular basis. Now, if it's somebody who has a similar role as you, then you become accountability partners for each other, and you can share what you're doing, and you're learning in the process. What we recommend is that only you set a time each week, you stick to that time, and it only has to be a half hour. You say, this is what we said we were doing I said I was going to do last week. This is what I did. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do. You're done. And then you go into the next thing. It's that very situation in which you have to say it to somebody else. Creates personal pride or whatever that says, I'm going to do it. But it doesn't have that connotation of having to have a manager review it.
Yeah, well, it makes it real, and it takes away your get out of jail free card, right? Exactly. The one that we're really good at awarding ourselves whenever we need it, because we'll always find a reason why. For us, another thing that you noticed or that you mentioned earlier that I just wanted to come back on, and that is the positive mindset. As you were saying, like, we're very good at filling our heads with negativity. In fact, Psychology Today, they say that like 68% on average of our daily self-talk is negative, which just shows you, like, the majority of your day, your little voice in your head's not telling you good things. But how you show up every day, as you were saying about in the morning, I think we have to start looking at what are the influences that we allow into our lives to start the day. For instance, if you get up in the morning and you're immediately on your social media, is that making you feel good? For instance, like, are you seeing things on social media that make you jealous or envious of other people? Is the news, let's face it, it doesn't matter where you sit on the political spectrum. If you switch on the news, you'll find something to irritate you. So is that the best way to start the day? So I think you have to be more conscious about what you're bringing into your mind when you set out on your day.
So there's a lot of things to unpack in what you just said, but let me start with, that idea of getting on social media first bit. So one of the things so you set your goals, you set your plan, you know how you're going to get there, but there's all kinds of interruptions along the way. And what could those interruptions be? So you have to be aware of what your distractions are, and you have to start changing your behavior. So we talk about re-engineering your habits. And if you think about the view of habits as we have, you have the trigger that says I'm going to do something, and then you have a thought, what do I do with this? And then you have your response, and then you have a reward, the same thing. Well, you mentioned social media. The trigger could be, I come into my office first thing, and what do? I browse social media, and I go on Twitter or whatever, and I suddenly, what was going to be 5 minutes, first of all, can be longer. Second of all, as you said, I might read something that sets me off down another path. And now I've just lost a half an hour. I've ruined my mindset. I might as well just go home. Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to say, that habit is my first trigger is I sit down in front of my computer, I turn it on, I'll go check social media. I have to change that. I have to get rid of that. Even worse is the smartphone. The smartphone's there. We always have it. It buzzes. What do we do when it buzzes? The trigger is the buzz.
Yep.
The thought is I have to look at it. I might be missing something.
Yeah, it's Pavlovian almost.
So, well, and we can go into a whole thing about how they designed it to be Pavlovian, but you have to say, I have to change that habit. If I don't re-engineer that habit, I will not change that pattern. So the first thing I have to do is say, the thought is, after the trigger is, I want to pick it up, but my thought now has to be, that will waste my time. I have to concentrate on what I have to get done today. So you learn to put it aside. Well, my thought is, I can get to it later. An hour isn't going to kill me. And then, so now that you have that, you're going to have your response to start going back into it. Your response now is on the trigger is not to pick it up. It's just put it aside. And your reward is you get more done. You get more satisfaction. One of the things we find are those people who are most productive are also the most happy at work, the most satisfied with their life, and of course, the ones who hit the top of their sales goals. So it all goes together, but one of them things is you have to say, that's getting in the way of my goal. I have to re-engineer that habit.
Yeah, and I think that's an incredibly important thing that you just outlined there, because I do, people use a lot nowadays the excuse like we're busier than we've ever been, and I always say, I don't know whether that's true. I think we're more distracted than we've ever been because we have so many more things to distract ourselves. So we think that we have less time when in reality we're just wasting a lot of time on these different things. And I love that idea too. It's about, people who are happier, who produce things. It's like if you start a project in your yard, right, and you only half do it and you stare at it day after day, right? It doesn't make you feel good, does it? The fact that it's something's half done out there, but when you finished it, makes you feel really good. Yeah. So what are some of the other ways that you help people to get more focused and more motivated about what they do?
Well, I do want to go back to something with that. Talk to yourself, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
So as you stated, we say 300 to 1,000 words a minute into our head, and more than about 2/3 are negative things. So we're really, and we say things to ourselves we would never say to our worst enemy. And we are mean to ourselves. What the Navy SEALs, the elite group of, I think they have them all around the world, the same idea, they have a high bar to pass. But they also need to have enough people to be in the SEALs teams.
Yes.
And what they were only getting about 25% passage. Now they wanted more, but didn't want to lower the bar. So they did a lot in this research into self-talk. And they discovered that a lot of them, the recruits, were talking themselves out of things. And they implemented a program of how to improve their self-talk. And their success rate went up to 1/3. So it went up by 1/3 to 1/3. So now they have closer to 33%. And they attribute a lot of this to the change they made in self-talk. So think about salespeople who might say, well, there's no way I can talk to that CEO. What do I have to say? So do they pick up the phone? Do they walk into the room? Or even if they get the meeting, they become tongue-tied. So what we suggest on those kind of self-talk, identify the things you say to yourself that get in your way. Don't try to boil the ocean. Pick something. And then say, what happens as a result of my having that negative talk? Well, what happens is I don't move ahead. I talk to the wrong people. I waste my time talking to low-end people. I don't get bigger deals because the lower-end people can only talk tactics, not strategy. So what do I want to change that? I change the self-talk to say, I have a lot to offer. What I'm selling is important to the CEO, and I know how to talk to that CEO. And they keep on saying that. So every morning when they look at their review of the day and they think, okay, what am I going to do today? I'm going to reach out to CEOs. And then the thing I have to check on my attitude, I know I have a lot to offer. I have value to offer. And then they work on that for 30 days and 60 days. It takes, a while to change it. But if you say that's going to make a difference in my life, that's going to make a difference. So I want to stress that can be a huge difference. And that gets in the way of a lot of salespeople. They beat themselves up before they walk out the door. It's no wonder they walk in without that motivation.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important, and I think you're absolutely 100% correct. Is that we're very good at putting constraints upon ourselves. So to say, well, yeah, as you said, like, oh well, I don't know that I can talk to the CEO because he's too high above me or whatever.
Right.
But you're looking at it the wrong way. But you're looking at that the CEO needs something, you have something of value to offer. Therefore, it should be a conversation of equals.
Exactly. Now, a couple other quick little hacks to give you for motivation. So one of the other things that happens is we look at a big task or a task that's the most difficult, and we delay doing that task. So we fill up our day with all these non-essential things. And if you look at, there's and I wish I could remember who to attribute this to, but the idea of if I have a bucket and I have rocks and sand and pebbles, how can I fill that up? And most people fill it up with the sand first and then the pebbles, and there's no room for the rocks. So you have to start with the big things first, but those are the daunting things. Those are the things I have a hard time with. And this is actually a hack. When we did this research, this is something I picked up for myself, is to just say 3, 2, 1, go. There's that critical decision window where you're ready to sit down and you're looking at it and so you can figure all the reasons to talk yourself out of it. But just say 3, 2, 1, go and start. And amazingly, it works. Now, the flip side of that is sometimes we have those bad habits. We talked about, ooh, I want to check my social media for a moment. And so how do you stop yourself from that? Say 3, 2, 1, stop. So people talk about a to-do list. You got a to-don't list. The to-don't list is these are the things I'm going to not do, and I'm going to make sure. And all of these things are ways to hack the internal conflict that's going on between what your rational side said is your emotional side. And you got to let your rational side get back in charge. And that's what you're trying to do. And it keeps you motivated and focused and productive.
Yeah, I love those. Those are fantastic. But you're absolutely correct. Is most of us are pretty good at to-do lists. We're very bad at to-don't lists. It's like that thing that you have every year when you do strategy and people start going, here are the things that we should do this year. And then you say, okay, well, what are the things we should stop doing? And suddenly that's a blank piece of paper, and the other one of all the things we should do. So we're not very good at that. So we're coming up against the end of our time, John. But before we go, I always like to ask our guests about your personal. This is personal. What do you do personally to set yourself up for success every day? What's your power tip?
I think it goes back to a lot of things we talk about. So I am a strong proponent. If I'm going to teach something, I have to be doing it, because I don't want to tell somebody, go ahead and do this. And let me know how it goes. I'll I don't do it myself. Yeah. And I think the big thing is really having clarity of that big picture goal. That sets the stage for everything I do. And just to share a little bit of personal thing on this, I have 2 sons. They made it through college. Great. But I had for a long time, the goal was to make sure I could help them get through college so they wouldn't be burdened with all that debt. And fortunately, I was able to do a lot of that. Well, when the younger one graduated, there was a time where I'm saying, well, why am I working so hard every day? What is the thing I want to do? Well, it was solved when I had my first grandchild. Now I figured I got a grandchild, but it is looking at that thing, always saying, what is that big thing to do? And I will tell the audience here that most people don't do that. If you ask them what they really want to accomplish, they don't have that big picture goal. And people who are successful do have that. It's hard to do, but if you put your mind to it, you can find it. And it doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be something that matters to you. Yeah,
I love that, John. I couldn't agree more. People can't see it, but I have mine right in front of me here. Fantastic. And it reminds me every day. I have the few things that I look up at when times get hard, and I look at them and I go, yeah, okay, get your head back in the game. Exactly. Listen, John Doerr of the Rain Group. And as I said, if anybody is not familiar with the Rain Group, I really encourage you to check them out. Fantastic organization, but you guys also do great research. In fact, you released something recently, right?
Yes, we just released the keys to motivation. So it goes into more detail. We have a white paper on it that you can read into what are the most productive salespeople doing to motivate themselves? And it's a lot of the things that I talked about today.
Yeah. And the website?
Raingroup.com.
Yeah, raingroup.com. So that's RAINGROUP.com. As I said, I really encourage you to check it out. Listen, thanks, John. This has been fantastic. The time has flown. And Martha, all good with the Twitter chat?
Everything fine. Some really interesting things.
Excellent. I'll check this out afterwards. Again, listen, John, thanks very much for joining us today. My name is John Golden, SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine, Pipeliner CRM. I'll see you all again for another live sales chat really soon. Thank you.